Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome back to another review. Today I'm going to be looking at a very elegant LNER tank engine from Hornby. It's been many years since I last looked at one of these models, so I'm really interested to get started with this one. The loco is this. It is the Hornby Thompson L1 tank engine, which is a 264 locomotive, which is quite an interesting wheel configuration, a little bit like a backwards Pacific. And in real life, these locos were designed by Edward Thompson, who is not a very popular fellow, mainly because he messed about with quite a few of the designs of Sir Nigel Gresley, who of course is a legendary locomotive designer responsible for some very famous engines such as Scotsman, Mallard and also P2. And Thompson took a few of his designs and messed about with them, and in some cases, such as the P2, he ruined them completely, so not a popular chap. But that's not all that Thompson did. He was responsible for a number of decent designs back in his time, but this locomotive, the L1, is not one of them. These were ultimately a failure, they were a flop, and I will tell you why a little bit later on. But in terms of the model, from what I remember, this was a really decent loco. I bought mine in 2017 for just £100, so the value was okay. And from what I remember, it's a good quality locomotive, the level of detail is okay, and the performance was quite good as well. This locomotive is not currently in Hornby's range, but you can still find it quite easily second hand and for some quite good prices too. But it is a loco that I'd love to see come back into Hornby's range because it's got fairly good specs, and I think it would make a pretty effective budget model here in 2022. So fingers crossed this loco is not dead to Hornby. But today we're going to take a look at it, see if what I remember is correct, see what the quality is like, and hopefully enjoy what is a very elegant looking tank engine. Alright, the Thompson L1, and as you can see mine is in the LNER green, which is quite interesting because these locos, as we're going to find out later on, are barely LNER locomotives and they did not last long in LNER livery, but nevertheless I think this is the nicest livery, at least of the ones Hornby offered. Let me show you the end of the box then. So this is the version I've got. It is R3189, it is an LNER 264 tank, Thompson Class L1, and mine is 9003. One of only, I think, 3 examples that ended up in LNER green. And then let me show you the back of the box. You can see this was later classified as a 4MT, so a relatively powerful tank engine, that's for sure. And then a little bit of history on the loco itself, so if you want to pause and read that, please do. Do also notice that there's no drawings of this loco from Hornby this time, it's just this photo, which is a pity because I quite like looking at the drawings, but of course no major complaint. Right, are you ready to see this then? Let's take it out. I'll take off the sleeve for the first time and take a look. Well, it's not technically the first time. So, as you can tell, taking this out reveals quite a few differences. There's actually, well, I think the lining is showed here on the front of the box, but it's really not very noticeable, whereas on the model, I think it stands out a lot more. So, actually the model, for a change, looks nicer in person than it does on the front of the box, which is not always the case from Hornby. Anyway, let me open this up. Let's pull out the blister pack. There's the loco. It's got an accessories pack in there as well, so we'll take a look at that shortly. First though, here is the operating and maintenance instructions for the L1, so you've got just general information on the front there. Inside, a bit more specific, so lubrication points, yeah, that's very standard, isn't it? Removing the body, 2 screws, fairly easily done. Accessories shows you the location of at least some of the accessories, and also shows you the location of the DCC socket, which is inside the coal bunker, where there's a bit of space, I think, for a decoder. And then on the back shows you where the brake rods go to. I'm not sure if the brake rods are fitted as standard with this loco. Anyway, let's find out. In fact, I think that's a definite no, because I can see them in the accessories bag. So let's take a look and see what we've got in here then. So yeah, brake rigging, obviously, so that is not fitted as standard. We've got steps, cylinder drain cocks, very nicely painted vacuum pipes and such, and also a proper pivoting screw-link coupling for the front buffer beam. And this is something that Hornby often don't include even on models produced today. This loco, I believe, was released for the first time in 2010, and yet even this has got the screw-link couplings with it, so it's really good to see that. Anyway, let's open this up and take a look. It's well packaged. Yeah, it's got a bit of plastic on the top there to protect it. And there is the locomotive. And first impressions, I mean, it's clearly quite a complex and detailed model, but it also has quite a plasticky finish. I don't think I would have even noticed this back in 2017 when I first got it. But since then, we've seen a lot of manufacturers really up the game in the quality of the finish on their different models. And I think by comparison, this looks a little bit plasticky now, but it's not too bad. And it is, well, it looks like it's been decorated quite precisely, doesn't it? So here it is up close then, and noticeably it's quite a hefty loco. I think there's a very heavy die-cast chassis inside this one. But outwardly it is quite plasticky, definitely. The running plate is just made of plastic, not die-cast as you might expect. But then again, this only cost me around £100, so I think given the size of the tank engine, that is more or less reflected in the price. I feel like if Hornby were to re-release this today, it would cost considerably more than £100, and then I think I would have something to say about it. But for around £100, I don't think that's a major problem, is it? So, lovely looking loco. We'll have a little bit of history now on the class in real life, and then we'll take a much closer look and check out some of the details. The LNER Class L1 tank was introduced to the design of Henry Thompson in 1945, when the first of 100 examples were built. Confusingly, there are a number of different L1 class locomotives in existence, including, I think it's a 440 tender locomotive, so do bear that in mind if you search up these locos. This class, though, is known as an LNER locomotive, but astonishingly only one example was actually built by the LNER, with the remaining examples being built under British Railways, making the L1 only 1% LNER. Although I think, like I say, I think 3 examples did actually carry LNER livery. This tank engine was primarily intended for passenger work, and in this fact lies the Achilles heel of this locomotive. As per Thompson's design, it was built with very small driving wheels. You might have already noticed this. A little bit like the ones used on freight locomotives, which allow maximum torque but low speed. As passenger locomotives, though, the L1 was expected to run at high speed, competing with other high-speed steam locomotives of the era, of course. And this just wore the engines out completely in a very short time. The axle boxes, the pistons, the bearings, all being completely knackered, well short of their expected service life. A few frantic experimental modifications were tried in order to rectify this problem, but nothing seemed to fix it. And every single example was withdrawn and scrapped between 1960 and 1962, meaning that the engine survived in service for 17 years at the maximum, with some examples surviving for as little as 10 years. So there she is, the Hornby Thompson L1 tank, up close and personal for you. And this is much, much better than I expected it to be. This model was first released in 2010, which makes this a 12-year-old locomotive now. And of course, models have come a really long way in the last 12 years, which meant I was expecting this to look quite dated by now. But it really doesn't. It's a very complex model, and honestly, the only thing about this that sort of shows me its age is the finish, which is quite plasticky, as you can see up close. It doesn't have the satin sheen that a modern high-quality loco does. But I think the rest of the model is really, really well done, to the point where it's probably quite a bit better than what Hornby are producing today. It's a very complex model, and of course Hornby's models today are very complex, but a lot of the modern ones end up with glue marks all over them and that, not assembled that well. This one is assembled extremely well. There's an absolute minimum of visible glue, which is fantastic. It's also a very heavy loco at 294 grams, which is more than the Bachmann V2 tank engine of a similar size, and it's actually only 2 grams less than a Hornby D16, which has a die-cast metal boiler and also a tender included in that weight as well. So the weight is alright, although of course there is no die-cast running plate on this loco, and I suppose if that had have been metal, then the loco would have weighed even more. But on the plus side, there is no warping that I can see on the running plate. It all seems to be nice and straight on both the upper and the lower level. I don't know whether the front buffer beams are sort of sloping upwards very slightly, so I don't know if that's some warping or it could just be me. Either way, it's nothing too serious and it's only noticeable under real scrutiny. Let's take a look at the decoration then, because looking at the lining on the boiler here, you can see how quality it is. Very, very precise. Again, for around 2010, very, very impressive. The tanks are also nicely decorated as well with very precise white lining. And then you've got this simplified version of the LNER font and numbering, which is quite typical of locos during that transition between the Big Four and then the British Railways nationalisation. So yeah, that's all good. And then of course the running plate itself has got the red lining on it, so have the steps, which I think look fantastic, and the cylinders. Yeah, you can't beat a set of cylinders with the lovely lining on it. The buffer beams are also nicely lined with the running number on them, and while we're looking at the buffer beams, yes, we do have metal, separately fitted and sprung buffers, which is wonderful. Then on the front there, you've got the very finely printed builder's plate, and I'm guessing that's legible too, because they usually are from Hornby. Let's see decoration. The wheels, yes, the wheels are also heavily decorated. You've got lining around the outer wheel, as well as the black centres with the white lining around those two. It's not too bad. I mean, it's not perfectly neat on some of the driving wheels, but overall, from a distance, the effect is marvellous, as I'm sure you can tell. Detail then, there is a lot of complex detail on this loco. I think the first, it's a minor feature, but it's quite a rare one, is the lamps. Not only are lamps included with the model, but they're also factory fitted, not just included in the accessories bag. This is very rare from Hornby. You don't tend to get lamps on Hornby locos, and here we've got one with a full suite of lamps, even up on top of the smoke box. And they're generally quite well fitted as well, except for the ones on the back. I think these centre ones are pretty loose, and they were that way when I got this. That's the only quality issue I really spotted on this loco. The rest of it was fantastic. Oh, I suppose there is a bit of white stray paint on the back of the coal bunker there. Yeah, I remember that was there when I got it as well. But besides that, yeah, it's a very good quality model. The smoke box is quite a complex one, isn't it? Or at least the smoke box door is. You've got the separately fitted smoke box dart, the wire handrails, and quite a few different details on there. And speaking of handrails, the model has wire ones across the boiler as well as quite an array of complex looking pipework, which I think all looks very nice and realistic and fine. Plenty of detail on the tops of the tanks, including the water filler caps and more metal handrails. And over on the other side, you've got, I never know whether these are Westinghouse pumps or condensing equipment or a mechanical reverser, but there's some sort of pressure-based paraphernalia on the side of the loco. I can get away with that. That's a great phrase. With, yeah, very neatly applied pipework and connections to it. So, yeah, it's just very, very impressive to see something like that so nicely presented. Metal safety valves, yeah, that's a great feature. I mean, you can just tell those are metal. The whistle is a bit more complicated, and I suppose that means it couldn't have been turned out of metal, but it is painted so that it more or less matches the metal safety valves, and at least it's quite a complex piece. And then around the cab, you can see we've got nice glazing, which is flush to the outside of the loco with a nice bit of lining around it as well. On top of the cab, you've got two opening air intakes, which are free to move. Look at this, £100. It's fantastic, really. I wish prices were like that these days. And then inside the cab, bear in mind this is a very enclosed cab. There is an awful lot of detail inside there. A very, very realistic looking regulator which protrudes a long way, which tells me it is probably separately fitted. And all of the gauges are fully picked out. I mean, there is no way on earth you would ever get eyes on those as the loco is running. But just knowing that that detail is in there and seeing it upon closer inspection is just really wonderful. Very, very impressive. Lots of pipework underneath the cab, which again is all nice and fine. And then you've got the pre-fitted coal load, which I think is probably removable, but I'm not going to try and pull it out for fear of damaging it. Little separately fitted ladders and other parts for holding tools and such on the back of the loco, as well as the pre-fitted NEM coupling. And I believe the loco did also come with a front coupling, but I haven't got that in because I prefer it without that. And finally, check out the lamps on the back of the loco. They even have the electrical wiring represented that connects them all up. Really quite wonderful. So it's grand, isn't it? Really, really grand. The level of detail is fantastic. The build quality is also noticeably great. Would have been better, I think, with a bit more metalwork, such as the running plate. But in terms of the actual way the model has been fitted together and the lack of visible glue, very, very impressed by this. It's definitely better than what Hornby have to offer today, particularly at that £100 price tag. I'd be very interested to know what Hornby would charge for a loco like this today. But let's move on. Let's talk about the mechanism. I'm quite interested to revisit this and rediscover what it's like. And then, of course, we'll do some performance and see whether this thing is a little bit better than in real life. And thinking about it, if this loco was a real locomotive built in 2010, there's actually a good chance this could have worn out and been scrapped by now. So if this still works 12 years on, then this Hornby model actually lasted longer than the real L1s did. So there she is, Hornby's Thompson L1 down onto the track, and it is a grand looking loco, isn't it? I'm not one of those people who just detests Edward Thompson and everything he stood for. I am happy to recognise that this is a nice looking loco, so yeah, I'm glad I can enjoy it, and I hope you guys can as well. Now, mechanically speaking, this loco is pretty decent. Obviously, it would be impossible for this to be bang up to date because it is a number of years old, but I think overall the mechanism is adequate. So pickups is pretty good. All of the driving wheels, of course, have pickups on them, but also all of the trailing bogie wheels have pickups too. So in terms of continuity with the track, it's almost like this loco's got a tender. It's got that many wheels picking up, so that's fantastic. The base keeper plate is unfortunately hardwired. You can get the very base plate off, but the pickups themselves are hardwired to the chassis. Now, you can move them out of the way just enough to clean the pickups themselves, but it's not easy to get access to the axles for cleaning and maintenance. So, not the greatest. I think Hornby's later models are much better in that regard. However, there are proper bearings on the driving wheels, which means this loco shouldn't wear out as quick as the real things did. And there is just one driven axle on this loco, and in this case it is the rear driving wheel. The body is nice and easy to remove, just 2 screws did that, and here is the chassis. It is a bare bones chassis, there's no flashy features on this, obviously no lights or anything like that. It does though have a 5-pole motor, and these are fairly decent 5-pole motors. They run well in a number of other locos that use them. No flywheel though, unfortunately. It is just a worm drive and the gear train behind this cover. So again, that's possibly a bit of an outdated feature. Here is the 8-pin DCC socket. It's got this sort of annoying bundle of wires and a capacitor in there as well, which does take up some valuable space inside the coal bunker. But I think, you know, it's a fairly sizable area of this model, so really there's probably going to be enough space to fit a decent decoder into there. And then finally, the gauging is pretty much as you'd expect it to be, 14.2 to 14.3 millimeters back to back. That's about in line with Hornby's other locos. Pulling power on this loco is really good as well. It comes in at 0.44 newtons, which should be around 27 coaches. I mean, that's better than the new Bachmann V2 locomotive. It's even more than a Hornby Merchant Navy class. So given the size of this loco and given it's only a tank engine, I think that's pretty good. Anyway though, moment of truth. Let's see if this loco is a good runner or not. Let's see if it still works after these 5 years. It did last time I checked. Alright, yes it does. And as you can see, at the higher speeds at least, it is very good and smooth. At the lower speeds, not so much, but high speed, definitely. I'm going to show you what it looks like at 50% speed. So, hang on. Right, forwards, 50%. There you go. So actually, the loco's not moving that fast, but the wheels are really whipping around, aren't they? So it's a good demonstration really of why the real things wore out in the way they did, because in order to get anywhere close to a decent speed, they really had to turn the wheels fast. So the model's very realistic in that sense, of course. Anyway, how is the crawl? Of course, this loco has already been run in, so that's not a concern. Let's see, so yeah, I mean, it's not the greatest really, is it? Nah, not brilliant. Cogging a little bit, not particularly slow and controlled, but it's not terrible, I don't suppose, and at least it's sort of sustaining itself there, probably because of the pickups. How is it forwards? Still turning, oh, there we go. So, yeah, it's just sort of jumping along, cogging quite a lot, no flywheel, of course. It's actually very jumping, isn't it? So the slow speed's not brilliant. I seem to remember this loco was a bit better than that once upon a time. Maybe it's just aged a little bit, perhaps. Maybe if Hornby were to bring this model back, a new motor would perform better, maybe. Maybe it's my controller. I don't use a feedback controller anymore. I think I did when I last reviewed this, so perhaps this was more compatible with my feedback controller. But using my modern setup, the crawl here isn't quite as good as you'd get from a nice new loco, but it's not terrible, is it? And at the high speeds, it's still beautifully smooth, and it's noticeably very quiet. Let me be quiet for a second. Yeah, just a very slight rumbling coming from it. It's very nice to run this, very enjoyable. Okay, so to test this loco's pulling power, I have set up 5 different coaches. These are quite modern coaches, very little drag. I don't think there will be a proper test of what this loco can haul, but as we know, it is quite a good hauler. But let's go and see how it gets on from a coupling and sort of stability point of view. So here we go. Back it up nice and steady. Now, I've got to say, even though the crawl's not the greatest, it is quite controllable. I think because it's got small driving wheels, even if the wheels are turning at a higher speed than you'd consider a crawl, the loco doesn't actually move that fast. So you can still couple up to things really nice and gently and move the loco around precisely, even though the crawl's not the best. Although it's looking a bit better there with the load. Yeah, it seems a bit smoother somehow. We've seen that before, I think, haven't we, with locos that weren't that great on their own. But still, let's go a bit faster. Let's try it at about 40. And there it goes, looking great. So today I've decided to run some other LNER tank engines for you, but do keep an eye on the sidings and see which others you can spot. There is an odd one out to the rule, so if you can see what it is and comment it down below, I will pin the first correct answer. This one is the V1, or is it the V3? I think it's a bit of both, isn't it? Probably a V3. Bachmann loco, old body, new chassis, with a nice rake of ex-LNER teaks, which I think suit the loco nicely. Always reminds me of the L1, the V3 does. In fact, so much so that I've got another one on the inside line. This is the old body and the old chassis, so this is not such a great loco, but it is in a nicer livery, I think, in that lovely LNER green. And that's got a few teaks, just 4 of them. Sorry about that. Move on, nothing to see. So I think it should be able to handle these coaches, but does it slow down on curbs or anything like that? Not very much. No, I think it maybe slow down a little bit, but again, I've not got a feedback controller on, so that's fairly normal. Torque does not seem to be a problem. It's a fairly substantial number of coaches, and it's not slowing down, which is great. I have also heard a few reports of the front pony wheels on this loco causing trouble. I agree it's not the greatest design in the world, and yes, some people have had issues. I have to say it's not really a problem on my example. I don't know whether it's just because of how well my track is laid, obviously that's true, or whether I'm just lucky, but that is something to bear in mind. I have had mine derail sort of once or twice that I can remember, but it's not something it does reliably, and it's not something I can recreate, but seems to happen a bit more often over points. So if you've got a very point heavy layout and you're thinking of getting one second hand, yeah, you might want to choose something else, but it's not a major problem, at least not with my example. Let's have some ratings then for the Hornby Thompson L1, and as always I think it's quite a lot to ask when you're judging quite an old loco by modern standards, but as you can see the L1 here has come out looking pretty good. So level of detail I've given 4.5 star. It's a wonderfully detailed loco, particularly for the age. The cab in particular is fantastic, painted gauges, separately fitted water level indicators and the regulator rod. Absolutely wonderful, and you've got proper lamps fitted to this loco. Alright, they don't illuminate, but I think that is asking a lot on a steam loco, I suppose, of this sort of price. The decoration is fantastic. You've got lots of separately fitted parts, some of them metal, such as the safety valves and the handrails. The only reason I wouldn't give this 5 now is because of the finish. It is a bit of a plasticky looking loco, this now. If it had a slightly more satin or glossy finish, I think it would look better. But overall, no major complaint. The performance then I've given 3 star. Generally speaking, at the higher speeds it can't be faulted. Fairly good torque, nice and smooth, but at the lower speed it's not the greatest. It cogs pretty heavily and it's not very smooth or convincing at all. So I have knocked it off a couple of stars there because we have seen much better crawlers than this, but again it's not that much of a complaint because the loco is a number of years old now. The pulling power though, by virtue of its weight really, 294 grams, is very good. 0.44 newtons, 27 coaches. That is more than I would have expected from a loco of this size. The mechanism is also pretty good. It's looking a little bit out of date, possibly in places, but generally it's got the pickups, plenty of them, proper bearings on the driving wheels, nice 5-pole motor. I think in order to get 5 stars, this needed a properly removable base keeper plate for better servicing, and perhaps a few extras like a flywheel would have really made this shine, but overall not bad at all. The quality then, 4 star. Overall, the amount of glue visible on this, given how complex it is is very small and quite impressive, so that's good. The decoration, the precision with the decoration is fantastic, can't really fault that. One or two of the details are a little bit wonky, and they were, I remember when I first got the Loco, but not very many. And the only other thing really would be the plastic running plate. I just think metal is higher quality, but again, it's not a huge deal, particularly given the fact that the running plate, even though plastic, was straight. Value for money then, so the latest prices were around £120 to £140. I think there are still one or two in stock at certain places, but I do think that's a bit expensive. £100 for me though, back in 2017, that's very good, isn't it? So I've given it 5-star, but of course bear in mind if this model did come back in 2022, it would probably cost quite a bit more than that, so don't pay too much attention to that 5-star, but of course I can't just mark it down for speculation over what the price now might be. Overall then, that is a very good score of 8.30 out of 10. Let's pop that into the ranking, and it is in the top 5. It's unbelievable, really. Above the Bachmann D11 and below the Hornby Hush Hush. And frankly, it's well deserved, isn't it? It's a great looking Loco, runs well, and it didn't cost a lot. What more could you ask for? In fact, that's all I'll ask for in 2022. So there you have it then folks, that was my review of the still lovely, actually, that's what I took away from this, still lovely Hornby L1 tank engine from Edward Thompson. Yeah, it's great, very impressive. I mean, we've had this a few times. It was the rebuilt Patriot. I think that was even older than this, and yet the level of detail, much better than you'd expect for a Loco of that age. And the performance matches too. I mean, if I bought a brand new Loco and it ran like this did, I'd probably have a little moan about the crawl, but overall I'd conclude that the performance is in line with other Locos available. And at 100 quid, can't go wrong. So yeah, see what you can do, see if you can find one second hand if you fancy it. They are good quality Locos, so I think there's a good chance they'll all be in one piece if you buy one, although check descriptions of course. And enjoy. I think this is a lovely Hornby Loco, one that I'd definitely love to see back in the range. For now though, that is all I've got to say. Comment down below, let me know what you think about this. Have you got one? What is yours like, if so? And I'll see you next time. Alright, cheers folks, take care.